Hi, this is Andrew Cronky, creator of Bloodrick, drawer of sharks whenever I can, and I'm at Heroes Con, and you're listening to 11 O'Clock Comics.
Hello folks, this is 11 O'Clock Comics episode 998. I am David A. Price. This is going to be even more different than the previous 2 weeks. Vince is still under the weather, and Jason actually wasn't even on the East Coast the past few days. So we are not recording together. We're not recording at the same time. What we decided to do this week to maybe make things interesting is we picked a couple of books that which we are each going to discuss. I have no idea what he's going to say about these books. He has no idea what I'm going to say about them. I'm not even going to hear his thoughts until this episode is posted. I will hear. He's going to send me his segment, and therefore, so I don't even know. I don't even have his parts yet. You'll hear him after this and before I decide to talk about anything. But as a reminder, this episode, as always, is sponsored by Cheap Graphic Novels. CheapGraphicsNovels.com is where you can go and get a ton of collected editions, trade paperbacks, hardcovers, graphic novels at major discount. You can even, if you're a first-time customer, head over to CheapGraphicNovels.com. Place your order. Nothing major, nothing big, nothing fancy. A couple things you've been eyeballing, maybe you want to grab before they sell out. And then after that order comes in, send Max an email. Let him know 11 O'Clock Comics sent you. And your next order, that's the one you're going to stock up on, that's when you're going to get your free shipping. That's a fantastic deal. There are specials that were posted to the Slack. And on top of that, a couple of things that caught my eye this week include Blade Runner 2019, the complete series omnibus hardcover. There's two covers, a regular and a direct market, $34.99. LAPD's best Blade Runner and detective, Anna Ash Ashina, has been assigned to investigate the mysterious disappearance of Isabel and Cleo Selwyn, the wife and daughter of business tycoon Alexander Selwyn. A close personal friend of Eldon Tyrell collects Blade Runner 2019 Los Angeles, Off-World, and Home Again, Home Again. DC Finest Batman Red Skies trade paperback, $23.99. From the dark alleys of Gotham to the red skies of the Crisis on Infinite Earths, DC Finest Batman Red Skies presents some of the most compelling stories in the Dark Knight's history. This collection spans the debut of Black Mask, Hugo Strange's master plans, and Batman's high-stakes confrontations with Two-Face, Catwoman, and the False Face Society. Through it all, Batman must navigate the line between his personal losses and his unyielding commitment to justice. This collection showcases the depth and evolution of Batman's character during a pivotal era in his history. Brimming with action, mystery, and unforgettable storytelling, Red Skies is a cornerstone of the DC Finest series, celebrating the timeless appeal of the Dark Knight. DC Finest continues a major publishing initiative presenting comprehensive collections of the most in-demand and celebrated periods in DC Comics history, spanning genres, characters, and eras. This collects Batman numbers 388 through 400, Batman Annual number 10, Detective Comics numbers 554 through 567, and Secret Origins number 6. And finally, Hawkman by Jeff Johns Omnibus hardcover. This is the 2025 edition, $59.99. Jeff Johns' complete acclaimed run on Hawkman. That's a weird sentence, because it just ends right there. These stories, also featuring the talents of James Robinson, Rags Morales, Patrick Gleason, and many others, reintroduced Hawkman into the DCU as he tries to reunite with Hawkgirl. But with no memory of their past lives together, Kendra wants nothing to do with Hawkman. That is, until she learns that the deaths of her parents years ago were actually murders and she is forced to enlist Hawkman's help in unlocking the mystery and finding their killer. Issues numbers 1 through 25 are collected in this new hardcover edition, along with JSA numbers 56, 57, and 58, and Hawkman's Secret Files. So that's it for the specials. We're going to hear from Jason, and then I'll come back and send us out.
All right, my boo, King Dap, gave me a couple of books that he was excited to read this week. And I said, all right, cool, bet. I'll read them too, and we'll review them. And the fun thing about this, or at least I hope it's fun for y'all, is that we did not discuss what we thought of the books between us. So you'll be hearing his thoughts and my thoughts separately. And who knows if we agree or disagree. Up first is All New Spider-Gwen, The Ghost Spider, number 1. Now let's address the elephant in the room. That is a lengthy-ass title, and I don't know about you, but I have noticed that in a world where the big two are constantly relaunching titles and doing miniseries, and some of the titles are just getting out of hand. I believe there was another all-new Spider-Gwen book a year or two ago. There was a Ghost Spider book. So this is the all-new Spider-Gwen, The Ghost Spider, number 1, written by Stephanie Phillips with art by Paolo Villanelli. I'll be honest, this did nothing for me. I probably wouldn't have given this a second thought had Dap not suggested that I read it. I know he's far more partial to Spider-Gwen, a.k.a. Gwen Stacy, as a character. So if I'm guessing he took more from this book than I did. But I thought it was a complete mess. I don't have a particular issue with Villanelli's art, but I think it's a bit crowded and lacks definition that I want to see in a really well-drawn superhero book. I thought some of his panels were difficult to follow and lacked a tightness in terms of the line work. So I would say the art was not a detriment per se, but it also wasn't a major selling point. But for me, the issue here is just the story. If you're going to give me a new number 1, and I don't care if we're talking about that this is 2025 or 2010 or 1992, if you're giving me a number 1, I expect to be treated like I'm in kindergarten. And you are going to make this book 100% unequivocally accessible to me as a new reader. You're not going to assume that I know who these characters are. You're not going to assume that I've been paying attention to what's been going on in their subsequent series and miniseries. And you're not going to assume that I understand these characters' motivations, backstory, power sets, or anything. And from my mind, Stephanie Phillips treated this like this was issue number 11, not issue number 1. Now, having read a million superhero comics over the years, was I completely lost? No. I gathered over reading the issue that this is a Gwen from another dimension who came here. I gathered that her dad is now also here in the 616 and alive. I gathered that she had powers, lost the powers, apparently was a symbiote for a while using different powers, has subsequently lost the symbiote, and now she has a new set of powers, which she got from somehow touching a cosmic cube. So I got all that, but I don't know that I needed all that, right? And I still don't know what her powers are. I don't know why she touched the cosmic cube, why we should care that she touched the cosmic cube. We meet the obligatory best friend. We meet the obligatory love interest. And we set up, I guess we set up a story of, in terms of like the first arc where there's a serial killer on the loose and she's going to try and track them down. So are there elements there that are you can follow along with? Yes, of course. But for me, this was superhero comics by the numbers. As with most big two comics these days, it really comes down to one thing. Do you like the character or not? If you're partial to a character, you'll probably get enough from this or any other comic on the stands that features a character you like and say, okay, this is cool for me. But this is not going to curl your toes. This is not best in class. This is not something that's going to be or shouldn't be on best of list at the end of the year. It's just reasonably solid block and tackling, save for the fact that it is by no means an accessible first issue. So I give this one a pass. Up next is Escape #1. It's published by Image Comics, and it is written by my boo, Rick Remender, with art by Daniel Acuna. Look, You guys know, if you're not a new listener, I should say, you know that I adore Rick's work. I have read, I'm going to say literally everything he's ever written in his comics career, and have enjoyed to absolutely adored the vast majority of it. And in the few times when it maybe didn't click for me, it was never because I thought it was poorly done. It just was maybe a subject or genre approach that didn't quite reel me in the same way. But net, Rick is easily one of my 4 or 5 favorite comic writers ever. So when I am not surprised to say that I love this first issue. I thought this was a absolutely fantastic first issue. But where the real fun surprise for me is Acuna on art. So I think Acuna is a very good artist. I think he's done some things that look great, but I think he's often very stylized. And there's a nuance and a darkness and a grittiness to this book that I didn't know Acuna had in him. And so it's really fun when you see an artist that you think you have fully pegged, right? You're like, oh, I know what this guy's all about. I know what I'm getting. And then he just knocks you on your ass because he draws it in a way that you didn't see coming. So this book is, like, if you didn't tell me who wrote this book, I would have told you it was written by Garth Ennis because it is a hard-nosed, deadly serious World War II, alt history World War II story, but with a couple of important twists. Twist number 1, it is anthropomorphic. This world is anthropomorphized. So we are introduced to a team of, I believe they're British. I don't know that it actually ever says they're British, but they feel British. British war bombardiers. And they are in air flying to a bombing mission amidst the war. And the lead character is named Milton Shaw. He is a bear from the looks of it. And he is, we meet he and all of his crew, the gunners, the bombardiers, the co-pilot, the navigator, all of that. And they're having a lot of really interesting conversations about the war and how long in the tooth their service time is. I believe this is their 28th bombing mission, which makes them very much outliers, as most people don't make it through that long. But we learn that this group, the Allies, which is a bunch of different types of animals, are fighting against the Germans, who are bats, rendered very much like vampires, bat-like vampires, or Man-Bat from Batman as an example. So spot on idea of choosing a animal that I think is easy to dislike, right? Makes sense. And other than the fact that it's anthropomorphic, it just gets played straight. I mean, it's basically an opening story that unapologetically portrays war as a awful zero-sum game situation where everybody involved on both sides are making questionable moral decisions. There's discussion about whether the soldiers on either side should be blamed for their behavior, and there's, to Rick's credit, he has different characters arguing both sides of that debate. Some saying, well, ultimately they're just following orders and that's what they have to do. Others are saying, no, you're making a moral choice to follow those orders. And he also does a great job by not only framing that in the context of the bats, aka Nazis, where we all kind of have our very strong views as to whether it was right or wrong, but he turns the mirror on themselves and asks the same question of their own behavior. Whether they should be villainized for killing innocent people and dropping bombs on towns and cities. And I love that. I just think it was really well done, and it fits with, if you know Rick at all, it fits with his worldviews. I think so. He's staying true to himself despite telling a war epic. And Acuna's art, man, it's just incredible. I'll tell you, it in a lot of ways looked to me like Juanjo Garnido of Black Sad fame, which is a compliment of the highest order. I think the way that Acuna designs the different anthropomorphized characters and is incredible, and then the way that he renders the planes and the warfare and then the land-based tanks and battle scenes is just incredible. Like I said, it's just a guy I thought I knew fully in terms of what to expect visually. He has an entirely another language of visual storytelling that I didn't know he had. So, this is a grand slam for me. Absolutely adored everything about it. If you're a fan of war comics in any form, I think you'll really enjoy this book. And I would say, if you think you know what Remender or Okuni are all about, I would caution you that this book feels very different from anything either of them have given you in the past. So 2 thumbs up. Justice League Red. Yes, it's time for another team book. Now, here's the thing. You guys know I love a team book, so... And getting the gang together, right? That's a trope that always works for me, or almost always works for me. So when Dap said, hey, let's read Justice League Red and talk about it, I thought, okay, well, listen, you don't have to twist my arm to read a team formation book. At a minimum, I'm going to enjoy that part of it, getting the team together. Which is ultimately my complaint about this book, because I feel like I got baited and switched a bit. You see, if you look at the cover of the book, I see Red Tornado, I see Power Girl, I see Simon Baz Green Lantern, but I also see Katana and Deadman and Cyborg. And yet, in this book, we only get to see 3 of them in action. And so I didn't get my getting the band together vibe as much as I had hoped for. Now, you might argue, well, Woodrow, you're going to get that in subsequent issues. Fair enough. But in a modern comics landscape where there are a million new #1 issues vying for our time, attention, and dollars, you only have the first issue to get me to stay or go. And especially when it comes to big 2 superhero books these days, I don't need much of a nudge to not keep going. So did they do enough to keep me coming back? You'll know in a few seconds. The premise is a pretty simple one. This book, first of all, is written by Saladin Ahmed, with art by Clayton Henry and colors by Arif Prianto. So Ahmed sets a tone of Red Tornado, who is currently the operating system of the Justice League Unlimited's Watchtower. He's kind of the guy that in prior iterations would have been portrayed by Martian Manhunter. Well, I guess as he's doing his business, he started doing massive cosmic level Monte Carlo simulations and concluded that the formulation of the Justice League Unlimited is going to ultimately, through butterfly effect, lead to the end of the universe. Now, how and why, I don't know that we really get into that, and that's fine. But he comes to that conclusion. And as a result, he's decided that he needs to form a covert ops team that's completely outside of the purview of the rest of the JLU. And they need to act proactively to help stop certain events from happening such that the end of the universe will be prevented. He recruits Power Girl and Simon Baz in this issue. And then they arrive and he explains the situation and they agree to help him on a mission. That mission goes well in that they achieve what he asked them to do, but the cliffhanger of the issue is that it appears that the people with which they intervened against were not who he said they were and seemed quite a bit more benevolent than he had suggested, leading one to ask if Red Tornado's got ulterior motives, if he himself is evil, if there's something like a glitch in the Matrix. But either way, there are questions. I have no issues at all with the layout of this, with the premise. This is superhero storytelling. There's always going to be, between the big 2, a handful of covert or B teams. They'll come and they'll go. This one doesn't strike me as one that will be around forever. It was nice to see Clayton Henry on interiors. We rarely get to see that these days. He has a crispy, clean line. The kind of line that I would imagine Vince would have hated if he read this book. But I know Dap and I have both been longtime fans of Clayton's art, and it worked for me. Is it the most dynamic? No. I think Clayton's work can come off as a bit stiff sometimes, but I love a good, clean line when it comes to a superhero book, and we got that. So I was totally satisfied artistically. I will say, I guess working against this book for me specifically, I have never been a big Power Girl fan. Absent the Palmiotti, Gray, Amanda Connor era, of comics when she was prominent in their books. I really enjoyed her there. But generally speaking, I've never found her to be a draw one way or the other. If she's there, cool, but I'm never going to seek her out in and of herself. And then Simon Baz, I could probably count on my hands the number of issues I've read with him in it. And I'm sure he's been in a million like event or team up books over the years as a background character. I just mean issues where he's a prominently featured lead character. So no issues with him as a character. He seems perfectly fine. I'm not sure what makes him distinctive relative to other Green Lanterns, other than he wears a mask covering his face. But I've always dug the Lanterns as a concept. So again, no issues with the characters he's chosen. Do they make sense in the context of, are they the most trustworthy and loyal to abide by his desire that this is something that has to be completely off the books from the other heroes? I'll leave that to the more learned DC historians out there like Dapp and Hostin and the like to weigh in there. I don't really know. Like, I don't know enough to really say whether that's on brand or not. But it was a question I had as I was reading this. Like, would these be the characters, or were these just characters that Ahmed wanted to use and so he chose them? But yeah, so net of it all, like I think the book was fine. Personally speaking, I think it's kind of crappy that you give me a 6-person team and we don't even see mention of 3 of them in the book. I assume that'll all be rectified in issue 2. Will I be back to see if I'm right? Drum roll, please. I will not. This was fine, but I live in a world now where I don't have the time, interest, or inclination to read just fine superhero comics. It's got to have a hook that makes it feel somewhat unique in a everly decreasing pool of uniqueness. And this just didn't quite cross over the bar. So I'm not hating on it. Don't think it was bad by any stretch, but just not interesting enough from anything else I could be reading with Capes and Cowls to stick with it.
First up is the all-new Spider-Gwen, Ghost Spider, by Stephanie Phillips, and art by Paolo Villanelli, and colors by Matt Miller. I'm a little behind. I have not. I haven't finished the previous volume of Stephanie's Ghost Spider, so I figured let me just jump in here, see if it's a good jumping on point, see if I'm missing anything by missing out on the end of the previous series. Art's great. I really like the art here. It's fast paced, moves the story along quickly. It's not a very heavy first issue. There's not a lot of meat here. Kind of just setting up the status quo. Gwen has cosmic power, and she harnessed great cosmic power, relocating her and her dad to the 616, and she she's starting a band, and she's training with Black Tarantula's son Fabian, who's also a costume character. It's a the colors are great. It's a good looking first issue for me. And I will be back to check out the second issue. There's a little bit of there's a hell of a cliffhanger. There's not sure how well Gwen's band is going to do, just based on a couple of pages in this first issue, and maybe what happens to one of the bandmates. But in any event, there are things here in this issue that I'm digging. Not sure. I kind of, if anything, it did make me want to go back and go through the issues that I have of the previous volume, just to find out how we got here. It's so well done in that regard. But we'll see if the next couple of issues keep me going, or if unfortunately I might end up neglecting this series and coming back again when it's relaunched again. We'll see. From there, we also have Escape #1. This is from Image Comics. It's part of the Giant Generator imprint. It of course is written by Rick Remender, art by Daniel Acuna. It is it's an anthropomorphic tale of well, we got animals. We've got dogs who are it's a war comic. So I'm not sure. I'm not keen. I'm not a big war dude. I'm not one for Dirty Dozen or Saving Private Ryan or I think the closest. I mean, I did see Platoon in the theaters. Full Metal Jacket wasn't really my bag. Got a kick out of Stripes when I watched the hell out of that when HBO played it back in the '80s. But I'm not super big on war. Rick's story here, though, I was entertained's not the right word, but it's nearly riveting. I had trouble tearing myself away from some of these pages. Acuna's art is solid here. I think I like it a little bit more than that Avengers miniseries that we talked about late last year. But yeah, it's not. I don't want to say it's graphic in the sense that it's gory and you're watching. It's not a Faust comic, but it does feel very, very warlike. The conversations that are had, the actions they're taking. I don't know. I checked this out because I know Vince is huge on Acuna, so I figured let me check it out because I know he was looking forward to it. So I'm really curious to know his thoughts on this issue. So we'll see once we all get to discuss it if where we all land on it. But this is one of those things where I'm checking it out because I want to see what my friends are thinking about it. But solid first issue. Really, it ends on it ends in a good spot and is set up to definitely want you to follow along to see where our heroes how they fare in the next issue as the story unfolds. So this is one where I'm torn because the subject matter really doesn't move me all that much, but Rick kind of hooked me with the story and Daniel's art is pretty fitting. I never really pictured him as a well, in air quotes, funny animal artist, but this works. It's not Mouse, but if you like Mouse, then maybe whereas Mouse is actually is Cats and My Side is pretty much based in history, whereas this is just a story. We also have Justice League Red #1. It's RED, not READ like I read Justice League, but this is written by Saladin Ahmed and art by Clayton Henry, colors by Arif Prianto. The red is I don't know if it's necessarily playing on words. It's a Justice League team with Red Tornado in charge, and right now this little covert ops team consists of Green Lantern, Simon Baz Green Lantern, and Power Girl, who are sent to a planet, and things don't necessarily go the way they were probably planning to go. And then And then there's a reveal on the last page of of a a big bad who's not unfamiliar to DC fans. But by the time I got to that last page, it felt like things moved pretty quickly. It didn't feel like and that's, as I say, it didn't feel like it's not a massive giant sized first issue. Clayton's art, as always, I'm a big Clayton Henry fan. Art's great, and between the characters and the aliens and the constructs that he creates here, it's a great looking first issue. I like Ahmed. I've read a few of his stories. I dig him. This isn't it's not a slight issue, but I was surprised when I got to the last page because I was just in the groove. I was chugging right along, really enjoying it. I'm liking Clayton's Power Girl as I flip through the issue some more. But yeah, as basically the little blurb is, he since Red Tornado since he's continuing his service as the unblinking eyes and restless mind of the JLU's Watchtower, searching for danger on the horizon and beyond. So if there's trouble out there in the great vastness of space, I guess he's going to keep an eye on things. So we'll see who else is going to be on this team, as if the cover of the first issue doesn't, give it away with Cyborg and Deadman also here. So those three first issues.
So we have another new Batman comic. Well, it's not new, right? It's the longest running outside of Detective Batman series, but it's a new number 1. I believe this is the 4th time DC has renumbered the flagship Batman title, and it's the first time, I think, since 2016, so almost 10 years ago, when our boy Tom King took over the book and had his legendary run. I'll be honest, I haven't been reading either Detective or Batman for some time. Really quite a few years, actually, now that I think about it. So I certainly haven't been up to speed, and I really can't comment here tonight about how I think this fits into the prior runs, like the Zdarsky run, which just wrapped up. So I'm not going to speak to that. I'm just going to tell you what I thought of it, kind of coming in cold. As to why I'm reading it, well, I do enjoy Batman as character, and certainly, like many, the current absolute Batman is totally fire, loving it. And I do very much love Matt Fraction as a writer. So the fact that he was coming on to do this character definitely piqued my interest. And as if I needed another reason, Jorge Jimenez is drawing the book. And of course, Jimenez is absolutely one of the best superhero artists in the business today. Certainly in the top 10, if not higher. So I knew the book would look great. I knew it would be structured in a way that I would enjoy, because I don't think I've ever read a Fraction comics that I didn't find something worthwhile about. So it seemed like a no-brainer to give it a try. So what did I think? Well, I will say I think it definitely achieves the goal of what a number 1 issue should, much more so than the Fakakta Ghost Spider book that I already talked about. Fraction and Jimenez do what you need to do. They're going to assume that you have not been reading what came before, that you don't know everything about what's happening, and they're going to show and explain it to you in a clean, cohesive way without feeling overly burdened by the prior history. And I just think they pulled that off beautifully. I hadn't read Batman continuity in years, and I didn't feel lost in any way. I totally get the new status quo, and this, to their credit, felt like a different version of Batman than I had read in a long time. I will say one of the coolest things about it is just the color palette, and that's a credit to color artist, I believe it's Tomu Mori. It's really neat. Like, Batman actually has that classic blue to his costume, which just felt retro in all the right ways. And I think that's maybe part of what Fraction's going for here. This version of Bruce and Batman didn't feel as nihilistic as what we're normally getting from him in recent years. He, I think, importantly throughout this issue was not alone. He was always having a conversation with somebody or with other characters, which I thought it felt like it was by design to kind of say like, hey, this isn't going to be your dark and brooding Batman, at least not at all times. He's going to have a tinge more hopefulness to him. So it just worked for me. It's a pretty simple story, which I think is the right approach. It's getting to know Bruce's status quo while also looking into a Killer Croc situation. I'll be vague with it. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, Killer Croc is the featured villain of this issue. So yeah, this hit me right. Again, I don't think Batman is ever a character that I'm going to be all in on, right? I can come and go with him. But certainly there have been times in the past where if I'm enjoying a writer's take, I will stick around until that take is over, and that was certainly the case with Tom's run. So yeah, I think I'm going to be on board this at least while this team is together. I don't know how long Jimenez is planning on doing this book. I feel like he's one of those artists that DC frequently rotates away from a book to a new book to help spark sales, and that will probably be the case here as well. But yeah, I mean, Fraction is just reminding me that it's pretty easy for me to enjoy a Fraction written book. And so I'm going to stay on board this for the foreseeable future. So I've been teasing this now for a few weeks. For our patrons, I mentioned on the Slack a few weeks ago that I had read something that was the best thing I had read in quite a long time. And then on last week's podcast episode, toward the end, I said that I had also read this masterpiece and didn't want to give it short shrift by just doing it in your travels, and so I would save it for this week. And here we are. As some of you have correctly guessed, the best thing I've read so far this year is Drome, and that's Drome. It is a new graphic novel written and drawn by Jesse Lonergan. Now, Jesse is someone whose work I've enjoyed really from first being made aware of him, and I'm happy to say that over the last few years, we've gotten to know him pretty well. I consider him a friend. I've been fortunate enough to chat with him at a bunch of cons, and also really fortunate to own a number of pieces of his amazing artwork. So I'm all in on Lonergan, and I knew that this book was coming for some time. So I expected to enjoy it at a minimum. But man, oh man, did it go so far beyond that. So Drome is a 300-plus-ish page OGN hardcover. It's published by 23rd Street. I don't know if 23rd Street is an imprint of a large publishing house or not, but certainly it's not a publisher that I was all that familiar with before cracking this beauty open. But nevertheless, they did a great job from a production value perspective. And if this is the bar they're setting, I would say that anything else that they solicit will be a must-read, just in terms of the quality of the packaging and the curation of it. So Jesse burst on the scene, I don't know how many years ago, but really the first thing I remember of him was kind of back-to-back. He did Hedra, which was a sci-fi one-shot that got quite buzzy. And then he also did Planet Paradise, which in and of itself was a longer-form sci-fi story, but more with a couple's romantic bent, partnership, sort of buddy cop / romance bent. Either way, both sci-fi tinged. So I think in some ways you could view Drome as like the culmination of Jesse's creator-owned artistic arc. This too is science fiction tinged, but I would say it's more of a modern fantasy epic. And one of the things that I love about it, and why I really do think it's the best thing I've read this year, is that Jesse intertwines lots of different concepts into the story, which we'll get to, but he does it in an effortless way, right? So there'll be times when I'll read something, often from, say, Fantagraphics or Drawn and Quarterly, where it's a visual spectacle. They're playing with some pretty high-minded themes, and that all in and of itself works, and I enjoy the work. But maybe it comes at the expense of the narrative, where it's just not quite a cohesive story or an immersive story. And then flip side, I think a far more conventional type of comic that we enjoy are narrative-based structures, right? We crack open the book, we read a plot, and the visuals, if they're good enough, keep us there as we follow the plot linearly. And all of that is fine. Like, that's a big chunk of the stories that we enjoy in comics and prose and TV and all of that. But to me, it's pretty rare when you get a high concept book that intertwines so many big ideas and at the same time feels like you're just reading a really well put together narrative story. And I think the cool thing about that is that no matter where you are as a reader, I think if you open up and read Drome, you will enjoy it, right? If you're more of a surface level person, you just want a story, you're not looking for the deeper meaning, I think you'll find this to be a really well done, completely satisfying fantasy epic. If, on the other hand, you're someone who's read a ton of comics and you're looking for a deeper meaning to really get you going, I think this delivers on that too. And this book is in no way evocative of, say, Grant Morrison, but I wanted to mention Morrison because, to me, when Morrison is at his best, he's one of the few people that can accomplish this as well. Certainly Alan Moore does it. I think Jason Aaron has had points when he does it, but again, Jason Aaron doesn't draw. Either does Alan Moore. So I think in terms of someone who can do this while writing and drawing the book, I think Jesse has ascended into very rarefied air. I'd put Lemire into that camp. I'd put Charles Burns. I'd put Mignola. I could probably go on and on. I didn't write down a list, but there are. I think it is a rare creator who can do all of this at once, right? And I think he's arrived in that regard. So, what's the book about? Well, in essence, it is an epic that I think in many ways draws from the classic mythology of creationism, right? We're introduced to two higher powers. You can call them gods if you want, or supreme beings, or preternatural forces, whatever you want to call them. They are two cosmic deities straight from the Kirby visage, where you can see a visual representation of them. They are as large as the universe in many ways, and they interact with one another. It's not dissimilar to the way you would have seen the gods interact in Clash of the Titans, right? Where they're kind of chatting, and then they have these pieces on a chessboard that represent the earthly beings, and they literally use them as pawns in their games. That's kind of what's going on here, but in essence, what we see is the creation of man, of life. These beings imbue cosmic energy into this orb, and literally Jesse has us spewing forth life, and like fully formed life, right? I mean, almost as if like the Noah's Ark exploded and a bunch of things poured out of it. So they create humanity and beasts and monsters and animals and fantastical creatures all at once. And they're doing this in a way as an experiment, it would seem. And it takes us through the fact that they do this and they kind of watch, and unfortunately, it's just chaos and violence. There's just insanity ensues, and there's just no order to it. And so as a result, these higher powers kind of do a 2.0, and they try and introduce offsetting or complementary forces into this planetary equation to help settle things. And that's where we meet who I would argue is the protagonist of the book. We see they shoot a beam into the water, and then we see the creation of this gigantic blue-hued female. I say female. We assume she's female. She looks feminine, but this giant. She looks kind of like a blue She-Hulk, I guess, if you want to picture it in your head, if you haven't looked at the book yet. And she comes to bear, and she is there to help settle things, to help add some order to the chaos. And she has to go about slaying beasts and essentially establishing her dominance over everyone else. And she does that, and she's a benevolent ruler for a while. She essentially takes control of things and becomes the empress or the queen, however you want to phrase it, and is in control of things. And things are going well for a good bit. Unfortunately, as with any system, there are people who are resentful of her power and want it themselves. And we see the machinations there, including someone that who was in charge as sort of one of the warrior leaders before the chaos was tamed. And he's got this eye patch, and he becomes somewhat her reluctant sergeant at arms and I don't know, head of the Senate or whatever you want to call it. And if you're wondering why I'm being vague about all these things, it's because Jesse intentionally doesn't give most of these beings names. This book is largely visual. There are important word balloons and text pieces within it, but it's very spare. Jesse uses them very rarely, and so when he does, they really have an impact. But most of the book is visual, and we don't get the names of these characters. We just go on their journey. And then over time, we're introduced to other archetypal forces. The Blue Giantess, she is doing great, but she's presumably lonely, or appears to be lonely. And so the gods imbue a new being, which is this animalistic, almost looks like a red-skinned version of, say, Beast or something of that ilk. And he's much more primal and animalistic, and immediately when he comes to life, jumps into the natural world. Like, he's not really interested in humanity. He is immediately taken to the wildlife of the world and immediately feels right at home with them. Kind of like a Tarzan character or something like that. But circumstances being what they are, he eventually gets drawn into the humanity part of this world and becomes the Blue Giantess's love, her mate, and gets cleaned up and essentially becomes her king or her prince. And they rule together and are pretty much an unstoppable force protecting everybody. And then the book goes on from there, and we introduce more and more characters that play a role. There is later on a yellow-based being of much more animalistic, almost like a giant beast, like a giant four-legged creature that is even more primal and less human and is pure energy. And we go through that iteration through this book time after time of introducing new characters, and each character then plays out the equation of the balance of how the world acts, right? More or less chaotic, unified versus divisive. And that's when, as you're reading this, again, on the surface level, it's just this interesting epic. But the fact that Jesse uses the colors he does is not by mistake. Think about it. Cyan, magenta, yellow, black, right? Like, he uses CMYK in this book as a storytelling device. And in a medium like comics, which is all about written and drawn sequential storytelling, it's brilliant because ultimately so much of comic history is driven by CMYK. And Jesse does this intentionally, right? The gods are black and white, which is like your pen and ink, right? Like the baseline for the creation of these images that we fall in love with. And then all of these primal creatures that are leading the narrative are the main colors with which you use in conventional color printing. And to me, it's such a wonderful concept that it's subtle if you want to read it that way, but then if you just dig a little deeper, you realize it's very, very intentional and helps make this more than just a surface level epic. It also speaks to the idea of creationism and then comic book creationism tied into the overall concept of creationism of life and meaning and being. And it just goes from there, and we're taken on this journey where people rise up against our heroine and her life partner. They rise up for them. The gods get more and more involved in the process as they continue to be at odds with one another over how things should be going and how heavy-handed they should be in shaping life and the process. And ultimately, our heroes have to effectively evolve into a higher plane where they're essentially like taking on the gods and their ideas themselves. So again, I go back to like Clash of the Titans or Jason the Argonauts. These are essentially demigods, right? Created by gods, but more mortal, but then capable of elevating into godlike status when called upon. So, if you take a step back, like I love mythology. I love the concept of creationism, particularly out of the Judeo-Christian religious ideas, right? As many of you know, I'm not of faith, a person of faith in that regard, but I do find the idea of creationism and what drives us and our behaviors and morality and humanity fascinating, especially in the context of not believing that there is a classic version of a God. And so he plays with all of that. He plays with concepts like love and jealousy and economic destruction and preservation, and even concepts like feminism and masculinity. And there's even a little bit there of sort of the toxic masculinity of abuse and abusing one's life partners for the sake of self-gain or self-satisfaction. And the amazing thing about this book, again, is that he weaves all of these concepts there. They're all there for you to see and understand and get. But it never feels messy or overly complicated or like he's just throwing ideas at the wall because he's interested in them and hoping they stick. It all sticks into a naturally cohesive, beautiful fantasy epic that goes from the start all the way to the conclusion, and I'll save the conclusion for your enjoyment, but we have a completely satisfying arc for everyone involved. Literally every major character that we're introduced to has a beginning, middle, and end in this book that makes perfect sense in the context of the book. And I got to tell you, again, as someone who's read literally tens of thousands of comics over the years, it is very, very difficult to pull this kind of thing off. And he did it. And I did read an interview or two about him in the last few months in the lead up to this book. And I know that he said that he started this book, I think, back in 2020. So if you think about it, he's been working on this book while he's done almost everything else that we've known him for. And he would just come back to it as he would get inspiration. And I think he even mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, that you can see the journey of his artistic creativity in the book, because when he started Drome, he didn't feel he had the artistic chops to pull off the yellow primal energy creature visually. He didn't quite know how to do it. And so when we see it in this book, recognize that he had an epiphany one day where he said, "Oh, I'm ready to draw this part of the book now." And he did it. And it's just pretty amazing stuff. I will say, too, that visually, not only does the color play work great, but like the designs are fantastic. I mean, every character is memorable. They feel grand. They feel cosmic. But he uses a simple enough line where it just is all there for you on the page. He doesn't clog the page with a million lines and crosshatches when he doesn't need to, right? And as someone who hasn't created comics myself, but loves the art and the making of the comic page, like hearing him kind of walk through his choices in terms of how to structure the book, like he's all about grids, and this is not new to this book. This is just his approach to storytelling. He said he used a 7x5 grid in this book, but like if you're looking at each page, there are every page would seemingly be different in its layout. So you might say, well, what did he mean? What does he mean by that? Well, to his mind, every page has this 35 section grid, and anything you're seeing that doesn't fit that is by design. So you may see a giant single panel on the top of the page and then 5 or 6 smaller tiny panels at the bottom, but it's all in the context of there being 35 smaller panels to work with. And from his view, that helps him structure things. And so part of the process is, as a storyteller, is how will the story read or feel differently if he renders things differently within the concept of this grid? And again, I don't think that's anything other creators don't do, but I've never heard someone speak about it so mechanistically, and yet it feels so organic and creative on the page. So I just love the way his mind works. I suspect he's left and right-brained. That's a pure supposition on my part, but just as someone who also is left and right-brained, it just clicks with me the way he thinks and speaks about his own work. So, kudos to him for that. You really do end up caring about these characters, even though they don't have names. You end up in like a good wrestling story or a good old Western movie. You hate the villains, you hate the people you're supposed to hate, and you root for the heroes you're supposed to root for. There really aren't anti-heroes in this book. I think they're more primal than that. And I like that. Because I think most of modern storytelling is more in the nebulous shades of gray, anti-heroes kind of vibe. And this is a little more pure than that. So hopefully I'm conveying all of the reasons that this works. I mean, I hate the sort of elevator pitches that Image does where they say, oh, if you like Wizard of Oz and Doctor Strangelove, you'll love book X, right? So I hate that. So I'm going to try and avoid that as a comparison. But I will tell you that, like, the way to think about this book is, I thought to myself, what if, like, Mobius and Druyer got together and had a jam sesh, whiteboarding an idea to make an awesome comic with, like, Chris Ware, right? Like, Chris Ware is very, like, scientifically structured by, like, everything about the book is structured and orderly. And I think sometimes to its detriment, I know that may be a hot take, sometimes Chris Ware stuff feels cold to me, but like the structure of things is unimpeachable, right? Like the planning and the process which he uses to make comics is as scientific as it gets. And then you've got these great European gods of myth making, Mobius being the top of it, but again, Druyer and plenty of others. And they all are much more primal in that they give you these incredibly organic visuals that you just couldn't ever conceptualize yourself, and they draw you in. But if we're being honest, and many times it comes at the expense of a story, or at least a cohesively logical narrative. And so what I want you to think of with Drome is, what if one person managed to give you a giant epic fantasy book that married the best of Chris Ware with the best of Druyer, and like some Mignola rolled into one. And I think that's what you have. And I think Jesse should be applauded for this. Again, I like him very much personally. I love his art already. But to me, this was comic storytelling on a whole nother level. For me, the best comics these days are the ones where I come away thinking, okay, there's no other artistic medium that you could have done this thing with, right? You couldn't make a movie like this because it's just way too visually challenging for someone to film, even with you need like $1 trillion of CGI to do it, and it would still probably look corny. You couldn't just write this story. It would lose all of its appeal because so much of it is driven by the primalness of color and the importance of color in the making of comics history, and that creation is a myth. You certainly couldn't turn this into a podcast. You couldn't do anything else. This has to be a illustrated, sequential story, and he did it. He did his damn thing. And so I hope most of you already have this book in hand and have pre-ordered it. If you haven't, I hope my love affair for this thing gets you over the hump, and you go ahead and either order it or put it on a wish list for your birthday/holiday gifts, whatever. But God damn it, you all better have read this by the time we do our 11 o'clockers in January, because it will be featured heavily. And I don't think my boos have read it yet, but this is one of those where I will side-eye the hell out of them if they read it and they don't also come away loving it as much as I did. It's that good. So there you have it. Please do check out Drome, written and drawn masterfully by Jesse Lonergan, published by 23rd Street.
I also read, and so this is, it's not necessarily, I'm not trying to paint a picture here, I'm not trying to go deep on this story, but just to give you some insight. Chasing Amy is a movie that is very near and dear to me. Over my shoulder, I have the one sheet movie poster signed by Kevin Smith. Actually drove out to Secret Stash in Jersey thinking I'd be able to score one there. But Walt Flanagan, who was manning the register, told me that certain things are only available on the View Askew website. So couple weeks later, I ordered it from there. This is years ago. This is the early aughts, probably. Anyway, I saw the movie after a breakup. I was at home nursing a broken heart and took a walk around the neighborhood. Went to Genevieve's, which was a chain drugstore at the time. They had a clearance rack of DVDs. Found Chasing Amy, brought it home, popped it in, and I was just mesmerized. It hit me. It was a right place, right time kind of moment, and the movie does mean something to me. However, Dark Horse has recently published. It's a new Quick Stops. It's the third volume of Quick Stops. This is a 4-issue miniseries. The first issue is Chasing Amy. This is written by Kevin Smith, penciled, inked, and lettered by John Springelmeyer. And if you have seen the movie, you may enjoy this comic. If you haven't, I can imagine people being a little bit upset at what they read, because this is a straight adaptation of that movie. Unfortunately, because it's not a full-blown adaptation, scene for scene, there's a lot left out. There are whole scenes that are just reduced to not even one page, but a single panel, and you may, like, you miss the whole. They try to summarize Holden's speech to Alyssa when he confesses his love to her. Banky's reactions to things and his wit and his sarcasm is kind of left out. Is just kind of falls flat on the page. It's a black and white book. The art is definitely it works in this. I mean, it's not like a straight up storyboard. Everybody looks exactly how they look. Whether it's Hooper X, whether it's Banky, whether it's Holden, whether it's Alyssa, everybody looks exactly how they appear in the movie. The renditions, the actor portrayals, they work here. It's fine. There are a couple of panels maybe where it kind of gives a Greg Land look. It's a straight up rip from the screen. It's a bit of a bummer because the movie does mean as much as it does to me. I was optimistic. I really didn't know. I mean, even the cover is an homage to Allred's Chasing Amy image. I wanted to like this a lot more. I mean, even when they bring up finger cuffs, it's chopped up, and we move so quickly because it's only a 20-odd page comic, and you're not recapping every scene from the movie in this comic, unfortunately. So if you're a fan of the movie, you may find some value in this. Unfortunately, I mean, hell, even Silent Bob's soliloquy on Chasing Amy, Jay and Bob are just here on one page, and it's. I'm not saying it's criminal, but it feels like it kind of does a disservice. It's unfortunate. I don't know what the second issue is going to be like. I don't know. I think this is an anthology, just based on a couple of things I've picked up here and there online. If this is an anthology, I'm curious to know if we're going to get Dogma or any of the Clerks movies adapted into the comic, or if it's just going to be characters from the Askewniverse and in just stories that Smith is writing. I'll find out with the second issue maybe, but yeah, I kind of wanted this to be a lot more than it is, and sadly it isn't. Still a Kevin Smith fan, but I was so hoping that this would be a little bit more, or even if it just like went into more detail than the movie did. Like, but it's a straight up rip of the movie, and a very edited and streamlined one at that. Sadly, so that's going to be it. I'm going to I'll demand your travels, but I'm kind of not quite rushing through this, but I want to get this done so I can hear what Jason said about his books. So in your travels, I kind of don't want to do a I'm so tempted to do like, a 60-second Superman bit, but I will just say that following up, since I talked about Superman number 28 when Tana was here a couple weeks ago, issue 29 is Legion of Darkseid Part 2, written by Josh Williamson, art by Dan Mora, and now Superman and Superboy Prime are heading to the future to save or save preferably the Legion of Superheroes and find Booster Gold, who Superman has no idea who Booster Gold is. So that's wild. The art is absolutely stunning. Mora's insane. This is a gorgeous book. I think I know what the plan is based on this last page. But we'll see. But yeah, to have Dan Mora draw a whole slew of Legionnaires and from different timelines and universes, and what Darkseid is up to, this last page is chef's kiss. But that's where I'm going to leave this. I've rambled on a bit.
Okay, in your travels, I'm sure I don't need to tell you, most of you probably already are planning on reading this, but The Knives, yes, it is the latest in a seemingly never-ending sea of Brubaker Phillips crime graphic novels. Now, as many of you know, the conceit here is that for the first time in many years, I believe since before the pandemic, Brubaker and Phillips are going back to the criminal verse for this one. This is a criminal story. And I will say, to their credit, I think staying away from criminal for as many years as they have made the anticipation for this greater than had they said, been doing like they could have done a thing where we got one criminal book each year and then one non-criminal book. And I'm not sure if it would be as exciting to go back to that world as it feels this time cracking this book open. There's a level of quality that you're getting from Brubaker and Phillips, right? Like, you're never getting a bad comic from them. They're incapable of it. And certainly Knives is absolutely a well-done, engaging comic on every level, right? I will say, for me, if we're playing the relativism game, this was less meaningful or enjoyable to me than their recent run of non-criminal books. And part of that is because I felt like structurally this book intertwines a couple of characters that we had seen in other volumes, most notably Jacob Kurtz. And it's always great when, that's one of the cool things about Criminal is that it is an interconnected world. So even though they time shift and they location shift, there's always little kernels of characters or relations to characters that come back that reward those of us who have been on the journey from the start. And this is certainly a part and parcel for that. I think you get something more from this book if you're familiar with these characters from their prior iterations. But I will say that, like, ultimately, I thought that the connectivity felt a little forced, almost as though because it had been so long since they revisited this world, Brubaker just pulled out a few characters that he particularly enjoys and decided to tell a story where they're all connected. And that's probably a really unfair critique of a guy who's 80 times better at writing comics than I would ever be reviewing them. So I don't want to come off as like too heavy-handed there, but I'll just say that ultimately, when I closed the final page on this book, I thought it was very well done. I thought it looked great. I'm glad I read it, but I didn't have the same excitement to race to the microphone and implore you all to join me on the ride that I have for many of the books from them in the last few years. So that's where we stand. But yeah, but look, you're never going to go wrong checking out Brubaker Phillips comics, right? So in your travels, check out the Knives, Image Comics, Brubaker Phillips.
I'm going to leave this here. There were a couple of books that came out this week that I'm in the middle of reading, so I have to get back to those. But I will. I'm gonna keep an eye out for Jason's segment. Get that done, so they can post this. I know that this was not an episode anybody was expecting. Might be a neat experiment. It's not like this isn't. We're not doing the Kiss solo albums. We're not all trying to do our own podcast, but circumstances have led us to this. Unfortunately, this week, Vince is, like I said, under the weather, but he sends his love to you all. We will hopefully be back next week. If not all of us, then Jason and I will be able to speak at the same time. Well, not over each other, but we'll be together doing an episode like the old days, like last week. So I'm going to shut up. I'm going to thank you for listening to this. Leave us a review wherever you want. You can find EOC or me on Blue Sky or on Instagram. We have the Patreon, patreon.com/11o'clockcomics, 11 o'clock comics. Of course, you can sign up there and join the Slack, get the bonus episodes. I'm going to shut up now. It's because I have trouble at times wrapping things up. So, thanks for listening to this. On behalf of Vince, on behalf of Jason, I'm David A. Price. We will talk to you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.